Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Strength Hammer podcast. Tonight, I have a new guest, someone you haven't seen, but you probably heard his podcast before, Brendan Melnick. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Chuck. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming because you have a much more popular podcast than I do. So I feel like you're helping boost me up here. I appreciate it.
I have a much further head start. We'll put it that way. I can say at the start, I definitely didn't have a more popular podcast.
Well, we'll never be Warhammer Weekly. I think we all understand that at this point. But you're
Yeah,
you're you're looking good. Like when
playing
did
for
you get?
second place. I'm good with it.
Well, you got the snazzy dress going on. You got the
Yes,
nice outfit for the show.
because I thought we agreed to suits, but I
I can't upstage my guests, so I have my streamer hoodie, also known as the hoodie I go to bed in right after this podcast because it's late to bedtime. But yeah, tell you what, before we kind of dive in, because tonight's topic we're gonna kind of do a little counterpoint discussion in regards to I.T.C and views from what I had with Joe Creer on recently. But let everyone know where they can find you, social media, and your podcast, because it's a great podcast, and I highly encourage everyone to listen to it. It's one of my regular ones that I put on whenever it's working out or just bored at work.
I appreciate that. It's been something new for Dan and I that we have folks who make listening to our podcast a priority. So we'll start with that. The show that we host is called Cubic Shenanigans. You can find it on Twitter by just looking for Cubic Shenanigans. It's got some handle that doesn't make any sense. Um, it's like Cuba Shenanigan 1 or something. I don't know.
There will be links
But
below for everybody.
perfect. So we are primarily an Age of Sigmar podcast. We do talk other things Warhammer. We've moved away from 40K and heresy and those kinds of things over the years and really focused in on Age of Sigmar. Our intention is to be a teaching podcast. Dan is a former educator. Uh, my family is basically all educators. It's what I plan to go to if this whole engineering career doesn't work out for me. Um, Dan has the perspective of a more casual player, and I have the perspective of a more competitive player. And our aim isn't to, stock up, stock down kind of discussion, but rather talk about the context of, particularly in Battle Tome reviews, what is here, how it works together, what you can reasonably expect, and how to make the most of it. We'll if something's not good, we'll tell you, but we'll also put the counterfactual to look if this is something you really want to do, understand where your limit is, but this is how you get the most out of it.
One thing I really like about listening to your podcast is you don't just tell people flat out, hey, this is the best combo, this is the best list based upon your experience and how you guys run numbers in your heads. You help push people to start thinking about that themselves. So you're like, here's some good combos, and then it makes you start looking and kind of figuring out how can you turn that into your type of army. So you don't. I do like that you're not just flat out run this list if you want to go 5-0. I mean, you might say that, but like that's not your intention. Your intention is to teach people how to look at the books too as you're going through it. That's kind of what I get whenever I've listened to them myself.
Yeah. And because overwhelmingly, players that go to events or just want to play with their friends want to win more games than they lose.
Mm-hmm.
And the starting point to that is having an informed base to work off of. And if you have that, you're already a step above from just like, this seems neat. Um, so that's our show. We release episodes just about every other week. That's the cadence we're about at. I think we're at like episode 91 or something.
You're
This is
approaching
what
that
we're
100.
recording this
Yeah.
weekend. So uh, I can't believe we've made it that far. Yeah, I can't believe we've gotten to the place that we have. As far as my personal stuff, you can find me on Twitter at hobby_bear, usually painting some sort of death model, and
Mm-hmm.
then when I do go to events, posting pictures of my games and things like that. If you like the Milwaukee Bucks, you'll also find a lot of likes and retweets from that part of the world. If you don't like the Milwaukee Bucks, I'm probably not the Twitter account to follow.
There's a surprising amount of basketball stands on my Twitter feed now. I've never been into basketball, but I understand it now just more from osmosis, from just seeing how hyped you guys get about it. It's great. Oh, you have to. Why don't we shout out? Because you do have an event you run.
I do. I
You
do
might
have
might
an
as well
event I
just
run.
just throw that out there. I know it's a while for it comes back up, but
Yeah, so aside from being the Adepticon Championships TO, I run a
Yeah.
private event, Brew City Brawl. I'm trying to get it set in the fall time frame. It was originally in the spring, trying to move it to the fall. Uh, I really love the notion of Warhammer that you play with your friends in your basement, and I really try to encourage that style of gaming at the event. We are playing big games now, so that's 3,000 points. We play on the 6x4s. Part of that's because I don't want to cut my mats down.
Don't blame you.
Um, the other part of it is I like people having the opportunity to play with their toys in a relaxed environment. I hand out a best overall. I don't have a best general award, and the best overall trophy is of the same caliber and magnitude as the special award that we came up with, Tyler and I, many years ago, Sigmar Hard Mode, aka the Special Snowflake Award, where we acknowledge and accreditate the uh, player who had a winning record and also brought maybe the weirdest list. Um, So like this last year in 2021, the winner of that was Kenny Lull, who had a bunch of Iron Blasters and a Mega Gargant and just a bunch of Foot Ogres, and that was really
Hmm.
cool. The time prior, Domus won it with just a full Thunderscorn list.
Oh yeah, it's a
Uh,
beautiful army.
yeah, the first year was Nagash and a bunch of wolves and a bunch of bats. It was it's just
Walking to
wild.
pets. That's
Yeah,
cool.
so
Yeah, yeah.
you
That's
know,
nice diversity from other events, but you still keep the competitive feel around it. For people that want that, but people who aren't after that, there's plenty of things for them to chase. And it sounds like a good time every time I've heard anyone talk about it.
awesome, because the mission statement from it is I want everybody's game 5 to matter from an awards perspective.
Nice.
Just because you're playing on bottom table, just because you're playing on the most middle table, just because you're playing on the top table doesn't necessarily mean anything. There's something there at stake for you that's worthwhile playing for.
No, and that's perfect. And that mentality kind of ties into one reason why I wanted to have you on. Obviously, you listened to 2 episodes ago. I had Joe Career on. We were talking about I.T.C, and we kind of did do some future, like what could this look like if you take the I.T.C competitive scene to like that true esports level. And obviously, there's things within that scope that even I'm comfortable with, and I know many people are. So, um, but still, I'm more of a proponent on the I like I.T.C, but there is cautionary things to keep in mind. And you've voiced them very nicely on your podcast. You weren't emotional about it. You were just matter of fact, and it wasn't everything. You were not against everything. You're just cautionary on a few things. And I liked your points and counterpoints. When we were talking in a group chat, and I really want to have you on, so the audience that I do have can see the counterpoint to the other argument of yes, the I.T.C is great. Let's do it. It's like, okay, what could go wrong? What's the cautionary tale? Let's break that down. Like you are from the Midwest, which seems to be, like I said, from my understanding of the nature of the world, the biggest group of Age of Sigmar players who were kind of, I don't want to say against the I.T.C because I don't want to make it sound combative, because this isn't a debate. This isn't arguing. This is just people with different preferences, and we're just having dialogues about it. But
It's the internet. You have to pick a side. There's no middle ground. Somebody's going to be right at the end of this.
okay, we'll solve it, but we'll solve it within the hour. But
Yeah,
yeah, you're on the different side of the fence of being for the I.T.C wholesale. So
sure.
I just want to hear, maybe like a broad overview, like where do you stand, I guess, within the scope of the I.T.C as it stands today, and the partnership with GW. We'll just break that out, let it flow as it may.
Yeah, so it was certainly an interesting announcement, and I think a lot of us jumped to the same conclusion all together, all at once upon reading it, that this is ultimately going to be some version of a Games Workshop purchase from a business perspective. It starts as a partnership and then ends in ownership. They had a number of things in the announcement that I thought were terrific and exciting and fantastic, because prior to any of that partnership, when you consider the I.T.C as a standalone concept, uh, genuinely, I have no love for it. You know, from a TO perspective, from a player perspective, if the event is I.T.C, it really doesn't make a difference to me from a player. I like playing tough lists. I like playing hard games. Cool, whatever. If it's I.T.C, if it's WWE, like I don't care. Whatever it's going to be is whatever it's going to be. The issue on the front end, which is going to be the continued core portion of my arguments, is that when you place outside real, meaningful financial incentives to winning conditions, you are going to generate outsized high risk behavior relative to removing the incentive. And in the definition of high risk in this case, it's the worst of it is outright cheating.
Mm-hmm.
But you have things of the nature of angle shooting, obfuscation,
Collusion between players,
collusion,
possibly.
right? Things that, if not are outright immoral, are in ethically dubious terms.
Mm-hmm.
When you increase the incentive, the likelihood of those to occur is going to increase. That's scientific, that's provable, that's human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's why so many um, different businesses and legal systems have penalties as defined as the way they are. That the goal is to present an outsized punishment relative to the potential reward to make it unpalatable to attempt to do that non-desired behavior.
Mm-hmm.
The effectiveness of those things you can debate about, right? That is the nature of government and rules and things of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there will always be people that do something wrong. I'm not suggesting that the environment that exists presently is without those who do not engage in those activities. But if you were to take money out of banks, would people continue robbing banks? There are always going to be people who do things that are wrong for XYZ whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry that this is the thing that you need to derive value from. There's so much more out there for you as a person that you just need to find.
Yeah, the
Um,
validation you get from a ranking system within a war game, sure, it can be a little fun and exciting, but it is not worth one putting your entire personality on the line for. Like don't attach yourself to something like that. Like you said, life is much bigger than wargaming. This is a hobby. This is fun. People take it to different levels. So I agree with you wholesale there. And I do agree. I mean, in one of my prior jobs, I was in purchasing, and it's just blatantly in my contract that you will not accept bribes or you'll be terminated. Blah 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 blah. I mean, that's, as I said, that's human nature. So that's in every contract. If you have the potential to get anything that could be perceived as a bribe or a persuasion, so I get that, and I don't disagree with that at all. I do feel, maybe from the standpoint of Age of Sigmar, the way our community grew up after the explosion of the end times and the community, that we have a very different community than what 40K has.
Presently, today, yes.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
I agree with that notion. But this is a door that's opening for this community. There's a stated partnership that is going to be occurred. There is going to be a push towards growth-based tools and items that we have seen is successful in demonstrating growth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that part of it is inarguable. The I.T.C has done wonders in terms of pure growth from a player perspective. But 40K has a lot of miles down this road that Age
Mm-hmm.
of Sigmar doesn't have from I.T.C. And I don't think it's important to look at what today is, because it's probably going to be great,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
I mean, we're still in the golden
but
age of Warhammer, for sure. And it's going
yeah,
to be there for years to come. But,
what's 5 years down the road look like? What's 10? If we do nothing, the position, if we do nothing to change the approach that I.T.C has already taken, the concern that I place on the table is we are going to be the same community that 40K is presently,
mm-hmm. and
where
and to be fair to 40K, there is good in the 40K community. We're not saying it's a bad community, but there's been more notable bad actors in the past X number of years that we've seen.
extremely high
Yeah,
profile
we've
cheating scandals.
we've seen a few. bad apples in Age of Sigmar. I won't mention names. I know one of them was actually a 40k player that came over for a little bit until we caught him and he no longer plays Sigmar.
Gave him the business.
And that's on the international scene. It's not just in the Midwest or US. Like this is just
No,
across
that's
the globe.
people.
Across the globe, yeah.
It's just a percentage thing, right?
Mhm.
The naturally, the more players that there will be, the more likely it is to occur, right? That's it's going to, if nothing else changes, right? If we don't do I.T.C, but we have a 200% growth in players, you're going to see more cheaters,
Mhm.
more high risk behaviors, but the percentage is going to remain the same. We've now introduced a new variable. That growth could potentially introduce more, but at an outsized percentage rate, which is
Mhm.
where I think the concern for me personally generates from, because a lot of these high profile cheating scandals are cheating scandals that have occurred on camera at events, streamed.
Mhm.
Those are people that felt so bold in their activity that it didn't matter that however many dozens, hundreds, or thousands of people were watching. They engaged in that behavior in a recorded manner.
Mhm. And this isn't people who have gotten rules wrong. I've played a game on stream and I got my rules blatantly wrong. And as soon as I realized it, it's like, okay, why forfeit? Like like it's not that. That's gonna happen till the end of time because wargaming's not a simple
There's a lot of
system.
rules.
Yeah, you're gonna mess up and yeah. That So this is people
And to
who
say
are yeah.
I've played every game perfectly correctly is wrong.
Mhm.
Uh, I guarantee you, at some point, I have made a mistake in my favor.
You just hope you've
If it
made enough
was,
mistakes in the opposite end too to just balance out the nature of the universe.
yeah,
Right.
and that's the hope, right? The aim there is to learn from it. But
Right.
when you are unrepentant in that behavior, is where the problem becomes a real problem,
Mhm.
where it becomes a community issue, where it becomes a nature and a results issue. Because the thing past that, the people who are caught on stream, the profiles that were made, that were identified, what was happening on table two, where there wasn't a camera?
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean streaming is growing, so we are seeing more and more tables. At least from the competitive angle for the U.S. Open streams. I think top three tables. The FLG events stream the top two. There's independent streamers out there now too. I'm not sure if you ever heard of. I think it's Wargamer Online. He usually does 40k, but he's set up a van that he travels across the country and streams, and his Patreon pays for everything. So and
cool.
he shows different things. Like that is growing, which is cool to see. But I do appreciate the fact because one of kind of the note questions I had coming into this was, but you recognized it that the percentage of people who are willing to do this type of behavior grows just by the fact that it's a percentage based thing. It's not
Mm.
necessarily attached to the money. The money could and has caused that stuff in the past, but it's naturally as we grow, that's just going to be something that happens. Now, I am curious because I know you know a decent amount about the I.T.C. Like, know your enemy, lack of a better term there. Um,
Well, if I'm going to be opposed to something, I'd like to know,
right,
what it is that I'm opposed to.
right.
I think some of the characterization that Midwest players and TOs are opposed to it just for no reason is is just as bad as the supposition on the other side. The people who are opposed to it because I.T.C bad. Like that's not.
You're 100% right. Which, like I said, that's why when I heard we were talking and then I listened to your podcast, that segment on that specifically, I was glad that you agreed to come on to talk about this because to be fair, and I love him to death, but when Domus just said nope on Twitter to the announcement, like that's not doing anyone any favors. That's not working through it. Like saying nothing is better in that situation, honestly, or laying out your reasoning for this is why, this is why, this is why. Just
Mm,
just I, when the emotion kicks in, it doesn't allow people to understand why. Um, any discussion, like I said, in that private group we're in, anytime there's been a discussion on anything, we all seek to understand why, even if you don't agree with it, which is probably the best thing you can do as a human, as a friend, as just in life. So I am curious on your thoughts here because no matter what happens, ranking system, non-ranking system, but we're gonna take the I.T.C. They've grown, they've made mistakes, and they've learned from mistakes. So they do
sure.
have that yellow card, red card system. Now there is the argument of, well, maybe that shouldn't be there if people weren't doing this. But as we've kind of said, people are just naturally going to do this. Unfortunately, it's part of the world we live in. What do you think about not necessarily that system, but the fact how quickly they are able to adapt and change to course correct certain things whenever they come up like that? Is do you have faith that that could happen through this partnership? Because maybe there'll be more resources allocated, or at least more attention put to things correctly. GW is not going to let rampant cheating be something they're partnering with per se. You know what I mean? And I.T.C doesn't
I
want that
couldn't
either.
imagine that they'd be okay with that, right?
Right.
It's a um, Games Workshop likes to pitch itself as a fun and accessible company, and uh, yeah, if you suddenly start picking up the reputation of the events that you run tied to this are suddenly rife with bad actors,
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, I do expect something to change pretty quick.
Right. So without
I,
knowing business models, we can assume that there'll probably be more resources put in to make sure things are corrected quicker, better, and in a much more, I guess, streamlined way if they do pop up. So, I mean, do you have faith that
mhm.
that could happen through this partnership?
I can see it improving.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's possible, right? It's one of those items that uh, the the group that they're inheriting hasn't necessarily demonstrated, from my perspective, the ability to act on this with enough authority, right? They're in charge of it, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, so they control the end result. But I think you need to send a message early in terms of this partnership that this is really a zero tolerance kind of item. Now,
Mm-hmm.
a guy writes a wrong list. You ban him forever? No, that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are some individuals that it took frontline gaming ages to do anything about. How many instances did Joshua Death have before he became permanently banned from I.T.C and FLG?
Um, yeah.
Dozens.
Right.
It's the and it doesn't just affect the games that he played in; it affected all of those events he played in. Right? It When you have placed meaningful winning, uh, you've placed meaningful results on meaningful winning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, cash limited, right? But
Right.
lots of
Right.
prizes, lots of stuff. Stuff has value. That his activity changed that result for other people
Mm-hmm.
in a real and tangible way across dozens of events. The the more prominent one, I think it was the 2020 LVO, where there was at 40K there was some top table shenanigans where ultimately Riot Games came in and said, we're going to award a $5,000
Actually,
kind of sportsmanship award because of the nonsense that
I
occurred here.
I will challenge you there. That wasn't
Okay.
so much as cheating in that aspect, because I did look at that pretty intently. I figured that would come up. That wasn't cheating per se, but that was twist.
I said shenanigans.
Yeah, shenanigans. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But I guess for the audience, it was twisting the word, twisting the rules, like to that hard line because it was in your favor. And I think at the end of that, everyone except for the guy who did that looked better in the end because Riot Games come in was watching it because 40K was or the I.T.C. Sorry, LVO the stream on Twitch was on the front page. The guy from who runs Riot Games likes it, watched it, and wanted to award money to the person who had it happen to him. Who then he said, "No, tell you what, donate to charity." And then GW came in and said, "Hey, we're gonna match that." So, you know, good will always
Right.
triumph for sure. But
That's a great result, but it's a great example of what high risk behavior is.
correct,
The
correct,
the guy who did that wasn't wrong for doing it, right? From a strictly rules as written perspective, right?
right.
He engaged in an activity that is that high risk, moral, ethical gray area where when you have something important on the other side, you are more likely to engage in that than if at the end of it there was an amber beer container
Mm-hmm.
that has a cool sticker on it that says "I did good,"
I want one of
right?
those. No, yeah. I, I hear you with that. I mean, I can say the most recent issue I saw with actual cheating in the I.T.C. Someone who is local actually. I won't name him just out of respect. It was 40K side of things, but he was cheating dice on stream, was caught within, I think, a week. He was disqualified from any ranking in the I.T.C. And I think they gave him like a 6 month. He couldn't participate in any event that was submitting to the I.T.C. So, and that was very quickly. But you said that's also, it was because it was on stream. If it wasn't on stream, maybe it wouldn't have been noticed. And you can be on table 2 and win the event. It does happen. So I do see that.
Happens a lot.
Yeah,
I've been
yeah,
at a couple.
that's true. I remember being on table 1, one of my first fantasy tournaments. I choked so hard. And I went down to third. I was like, how could I? No, I was in this. I was supposed to get gold or silver. Oh
It
no.
was mine.
Yeah, yeah, lost. But I guess just to say that with that point is I have seen it be quicker, and they are doing more standards and procedures to give the correct punishments for these things. Now, I don't think it's as fleshed out as it should be, but also it's wargaming. How do you flesh out every little nuanced thing? Where's the lines and stuff? But that'll come in time if that's a continued issue. And well, I kind of, with your point, I think it shouldn't be just reactive. Maybe that needs to be a little more proactive to make things better.
And so much of that is dependent on the TOs themselves and the players involved. This is a community that is largely non-combative in terms of their desire to approach a difficult situation. Most people in this community really just, and most people in general, just kind of want to back off and just be like, look, whatever, this is something to you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
Or they don't even know how to handle that difficult kind of conversation. There's a
Right.
lot of TOs that I know that uh, they're not as aggressive as I am in terms of a willingness to put your feet in the ground and tell somebody, no,
Mm-hmm.
that's not how that works. Um, so the yellow card, red card, standardized discipline system with communication across events, if properly implemented, will be very good for this community. It will be excellent. However, the people who have had to suffer meaningful punishments are the ones who had to be externally caught.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sure prior to that there have been rumblings from people and folks who, something didn't seem right with that. There was something that was just kind of off with this game. I really didn't like playing that guy. It just wasn't above board.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you do at that point, right?
Yeah.
Like we have these sportsmanship tiering systems in Age of Sigmar where you have the opportunity to, kind of privately write to the TO like, hey, this guy played really slow, or at least the
Mm-hmm.
events that I like to run. And, typically I'll go and ask the person, what happened, and use my best judgment of, potentially not having been at the table for enough time to, really make a hard and fast, this isn't a loss, it's at best a draw.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of a thing. But you keep an eye on it all of a sudden. And I've pulled folks aside and I said, if I get one more complaint, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would never go, okay, well, this is
Yeah.
a you decision from here on out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
and there is the issue. I mean, the best TOs out there, no matter how many events any of us have run, you can't watch every single table, even though you're walking the hall. So,
mm,
just like you don't want the collusion or the cheating top tables, you don't want it bomb tables either, or middle tables. You don't want on any table.
everybody's game is important. Every
Right.
single round, that game is important to those people at that table, if not just for them, but the other tables around them
Mm-hmm.
for a true and accurate result.
Yeah. So, you know, despite any, like I said, any TO's capability, it does come down to, once again, the community. But back to human nature. We're kind of looping back into the argument here. Human nature will see that still pop up from time and time again. But I think we've really set that part of the argument. Like we would just keep looping if we just went back into this. So let's talk about some of the other aspects. Let's tell you what.
Sure.
Let's sandwich it. Tell me some of the stuff that you really liked about this announcement, and like one of the few, like a couple of the few positive things right away. You're like, that's fantastic. That's what needed to be done years ago.
Yeah, I think there's three things in this announcement that are uh, just excellent. The first one is their first bullet point, where it discusses that as long as you participate in any of these events, you enter into a chance to win to go to a special event that Games Workshop pays for.
Yep.
That is awesome. That is so cool. The look, because there is going to be somebody at some point who they can only attend, one, maybe two events a year. They're both nearby because their schedule just really doesn't permit it, and
Mm-hmm.
their name's going to come up in that draw, and
They're getting
they're going to
prize
get
of a
to go on.
lifetime. Yep.
Yeah, they're going to get to go and do something that is just so cool.
And if it's anything
Um,
like the final that happened in Dallas, that those people that won the event, they were paid to go and had like a nice steak dinner. Like it's a great prize, and I hope it's on that caliber, if not greater, for all these people that get to do this.
yeah, and the fact that it's just tied to attendance, I love. I love that so many of the events that I go to, the prize support isn't uh, based on winning. It's usually just door prizes. It's door prizes and charity raffles.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Winners get a handshake and a
because
trophy, which
yeah,
I'm for. I'm 100% for that. All my events, I know even at Nova, whenever there was prizes given for the top places, I was like, can we just give this all away? Because I'm with that mentality too. I do like just give that, like, especially too, like you especially are winning events whenever you do, like, how many times have you gotten almost the whole army and you're like, great, I don't want it. Like, you don't need it. I'm sure that happens quite a
I
bit.
I've literally walked off the podium, said to my buddy, "Hey, I know you're looking to start this army," and I just hand him the stack of models.
Right.
And he goes, "Well, what do you want for it?" I said, "Nothing. It cost me $50 to attend this event."
Buy me a beer tonight if you're so inclined. Yeah.
Yeah, like
And even that's not necessary. Yeah, I hear that.
you're my buddy. This is important to you. It makes you happy. I'm happy to do that. Um, so it's whatever. And this is just the ultimate door prize.
Mm-hmm.
So cool, awesome, fantastic. I love it. I love that Games Workshop has codified that the hobby track is going to remain as part of their I.T.C.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I I'm a big believer that hobby, the actual hobby, the act of painting, the act of conversion, even if it's not world class artist, effort matters, and that you are paying not just yourself but your opponent that kind of level of respect when you're going to an event and you
Yep.
put clear and obvious effort into what you put on that table.
Mm-hmm.
Because the game isn't about just one person, and what they're there for is going to be different than what you're there for. And as long as you can help provide that, that's a big deal. That's important. And presenting the incentive for that is also great. So,
Yeah, and to kind of throw this out there too for folks, and I know you're using future sight and standard business sense, but for right now we do have to keep in discussion that they are separate entities. It's just a partnership.
mhm,
Um, but I do know with the I.T.C hobby track, you can submit to the hobby track even if you don't submit your regular scores. So honestly, I think that's almost like a no brainer if you're having an event. Submit to the hobby track only. Why not? It's fun. It hurts nothing, and it just throws some love. And it's usually most events that even if they're doing I.T.C, they'll forget to submit that button because I think it's a separate token or whatever right now. Hopefully that gets corrected. But man, like, yeah, it is, and it should get more, if not just as much, pomp and circumstance as the regular ranking system. I want to see the best pay. I want to see Martin Orlando and Bleep Bloop. I want to see them get the recognition, like, for having the best armies in the world. You know what I mean? Like, why not?
sure, it makes sense to me. And the one thing I'd hope to see in here is a sportsmanship track. I don't know how on earth
Oh.
you'd manage to do that from a logistical standpoint, but to me, that is one of the most important things that we need to make sure that we maintain as we move into a growth state
Mm-hmm.
is a maintenance of the high level of sportsmanship that this community has presently.
I,
So
I no, I would love that as well. I know from my time, because I helped one year at Adepticon to learn off of Alex and get better at running events after my first year at Nova when I was wide eyed and going, oh dear God, what's going on? Uh, I,
that's quite the jumping off point.
it was a pretty extreme one, but um, and I'd seen how Adepticon, and I don't want to presume the whole Midwest. I haven't been to every Midwest event, but that 1 through 5 ranking. I used that the first year, and then I talked to Scott Reed, and he showed me, like, just do voted first and second best voted. That way you have tiebreaker kind of built in. And I switched that, and I think that's the only, like, to me, that's the way to do it. And if you're going to track it, if you're using an app and everyone's in the app and checked in, then you have to be there and checked in, and your favorite person has to be voted for, has to also be checked in. That makes, I think you could do a sort of track with that, and it's not necessarily the most votes out of the whole year, because like you said, if someone goes to every single event, they could hyperinflate it in a weird way, but
Sure.
at least they were in the top percentage of this. However, I think it could be
It's
done.
important to
I
maintain
guess.
consideration for, right?
Yes,
I think that's the nature of it.
for sure, for sure.
And the third most important thing, and I think this is the thing that you and I share a really high level of collective excitement for, is the support for tournament organizers specifically.
Mm-hmm.
It is a particularly daunting thing to get into tournament organizing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of factors that go into running a really good event. I went to basically an event every month for a year to get a gauge of how people do things differently, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I would do, what I wouldn't do,
Mm-hmm.
how I would approach it, what awards I think are important, and how I capture that feel. Number one, that's a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, that's a lot of money. The other side of it is you have to have the tables.
Yep.
Right? It takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money, again, to have the tables, the terrain, paint it, assemble it, store it, transport it, have the mats.
Mm-hmm.
And you have clubmates and stuff that typically you can rely on to help support some of that.
Right, pitching some money,
But
help
that's
paint it. Yeah,
it's still an investment.
you're right. Like I said, it's a lot of time and it is a lot of money. Even whenever I knew I was taking Nova before, I was still wide. I can't tell you how many pages of notes and hours, talking to people and writing down from the, like I said, events I attended, and then after I went to that first year, going, I need to help people who run better events than me to see what they do and get up their best practices, and that's I that year I paid to go to Adepticon. I didn't play. I think I played one game against Anthony, AOS coach. We did a fun game. That was my only game for 6 days for spending $1,200 to go to Adepticon. But
That's an expensive game.
it was Anthony. It was worth it. But yeah, and yeah, when I'm done with work, I just necessarily don't want to go paint 20 pieces of terrain. I mean, sometimes I don't want to
You're
go
telling me.
paint the army that's on my table, that's mine, that I care about. Not that, but yeah, I hope to see that support is for real. My most important, actually, my favorite part of that support was these little, I forget what they called them exactly, but these groups where if you're a TO, you can get in and talk to people who are more experienced to get
Yeah, the
that
TO
information.
advisory group.
Yes, that information
Because
is
that's the
that great.
second half of this point.
Okay.
You've
Yep.
you've you've spent all of this money, you've put all of this time in. You go to run your event. You're not solid on your rules, and you pick the wrong mission, and your event sucks. Like,
I mean, you usually get one. You usually get one event. Everyone's like, "Hey, it's fine." They'll tell you. They'll tell you when you did wrong, though. You got to be ready for that.
yeah, to have the people to, because I'm sure you and I could sit there talking to a new prospective TO and be like, "Oh, here are all the things I screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
This is the stuff you got to look out for. These are the rocks on this road that I tripped on.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you where they are. You can choose to take my advice or ignore it. Up to you, but at least you have a head start on that roadmap."
Right. Yeah, and I won't go into them here, but there's 5 right top of mind, that big ones of like, oh wow, I really screwed that up, and it wasn't. And it's honestly, most of them are more that relationship with the players, as opposed to, like, if you put in a scenario that people are like, that wasn't really that great, they'll just like, hey, could you not put that in the next one, or this, they'll give you that heads up, but it's not ruining things for anybody. But if you misjudge something, or that's where that comes in, and it is hard because, as you said, like, not everyone. I'm not the strongest hard nosed TO out there. So for like the U.S. Open specifically, we have James O'Brien as part of the team, and I love it because he's the exact opposite of me. Like, here's a problem table. He will go table boss that and make sure those guys get along and that game gets done. that's not something that's in my skill set, but that's also once again with TOs. Sometimes you need to recognize what you don't have and bring that person as part of your team. But
Sure.
and you're these everyone, it's all your friends. Like when I have my friends look at me to make a ruling on a game, I have to separate it. And like I don't care anything. I don't care that you're the best man in my wedding. You're wrong in this rule, and you'll sit there and you will lose because you played it wrong. It's tough, but yeah, I hope that advisory group really becomes a key point to all this. I think that's the most beneficial thing. Sure, send train to people who need it. Sure, whatever. But
I'm interested to see what the thresholding on that is. What size event warrants the attention and support
mm,
that Games Workshop and the I.T.C are going to provide, because the lifeblood of this community is the small local event,
right.
right? That is what actually builds the groundswell that allows growth for these big events, for Nova, for LVO, for Adepticon here in the States, to be these megaliths of eventhood, is somebody going to a 30-person event just up the road for the weekend.
You 1,000% right. I look at the last couple of years when these big events couldn't happen. What were we doing? We were playing with our friends, as you felt safe. Like my local club where we played together, we played outside just to make sure we got games in. So you're right. And if I had an 8-man, actually I did. I had a invitational. It was like one of the only events happening that month. I think even some shows even covered the lists. Bill Souza was there. They're just like, what the? Why not? Let's talk about this meta, even though it was people bringing
There's
stupid
there's
stuff.
nothing else to talk about, so let's do this.
Right, right. But that's what helped keep people going. Like if you take the big three events away, sure it sucks. We're still all playing Warhammer, no matter what.
Yeah.
Like that's not ending. And that's the other thing too. I wanted to just reiterate to everybody out there, whether you have some trepidations about I.T.C. or full blown I.T.C., wherever you're on in that spectrum of this, just remember that we are all people playing Warhammer, and we all love this game and hobby. So even if you're disagreeing with somebody, and I've seen people have had pretty angry discussions about things within the wargaming, not necessarily this. Hopefully, it doesn't get there, but people who argue about
Log
stuff.
strikes. Um,
Mm. But yeah, it's like at the end of the day, it's like we still love this game. We're all playing the same. So keep that in your heart whenever you're having these discussions, so you don't get too needlessly emotional. That's just a key takeaway to me. But
sure.
you have like, tell you what, I think we've hit all key points. Uh, do you want to talk about something that Joe and I talked about, potential future for this, of where it could go? Now we talked about it more going towards like an esports level, and there's a lot of interesting points with that because we're baseball, we're not a video game, so there's the
Sure.
nuances, there's the mistakes. If this got to an esports level, I don't feel like okay, I'm currently a paid TO for Games Workshop. I've TO'd events, and there's plenty of people out there who have higher credentials than me on this. I don't want to say I'm the best because I'm not. Um, but me, if someone said, okay, we're doing this now, prize money's on the line, I would all of a sudden go, okay, I don't want to be a TO for two reasons. One, I don't want to make a rules call on something and get it wrong if there's money on the line. Even people are playing perfectly right, because that would weigh heavily on me to screw something up like that. And two, there's no way I can't be compromised on some level because I know most people in this community. So chances are I'm making a ruling on two people who I deeply care about as a person. So how do that's one of those like interesting things I thought through deeper after the conversation. So that's the angle it kind of like it went with our conversation. So I kind of took that way. I know in your mind this partnership and this ranking thing could go somewhere else. So where do you see it in a way that fits the sensibilities for yourself?
In terms of if it went that direction, what my participation level would be, or
No. I apologize. I kind of went on a tangent, which is something I'm trying to learn to not do when I'm doing the interviewing. Instead of going on like the esports level where it's just money and top ranking and team, that sort of stuff. Where do you
Mhm.
see where we're at right now with this partnership? Where do you want to see it head? What's your ideal goal for this? With the Joe is on that level. I think you're going to be on a different angle for it. That's kind of what I want to pick your brain on.
I mean, in my mind, the ideal state is it takes what we have as these kind of local cultivators of community have developed, and for it to be turbocharged by the acceptance of a business that understands that this is a business, and the more people that do this, the more money they make. Um, but where we are able to maintain the things that make this community so special. I mean, some of my fondest memories are going to just the smallest events because someone put their heart and soul into running this tournament. Only 6 of us showed up, but we had just the best time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to maintain that air of community and positivity without the um, scandalization of what quote unquote competitive play even is, because to even have that conversation correctly, we have to agree on what competitive play is, what that definition means, what
Mm-hmm.
that looks like. And I think to some people, it's assumed that that definition is universal because you look at sports and you say, well, sports are competitive. I go, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Sports, professional sports are competitive. Um, but what about, you know, like the club teams that are in your community? Oh, well, they're competitive. Are they? Right? Like I played rugby after college. Our Division 1 team, very competitive. Those were all guys who were trying to go pro.
Mm-hmm.
Our Division 3 team, it depends. The
How much beer did you have the night before?
Some guys were trying really hard to make the Division 1 team.
All right.
Some guys were just trying to play a sport that they really enjoyed, that they have made a personal career of. Uh, in some cases, professionally for a number of years, but they're getting on in years and they've settled down and they want to do something a little less dangerous with their body. Um, but they just can't quit. They
Mm-hmm.
just want to keep doing it. Well, is that competitive? Well, we're playing the game, once every week.
Mm-hmm. Are you? Is
There's,
it competitive with your friend? Like I,
yeah,
yeah, I
there are some folks that I am comfortable playing just in my basement, just all out, dirtyless, hard game, no takebacks. We're gonna play this game to the nines,
right.
and that's a competitive game of Warhammer. And there's people that I will stand on their side of the table with them and explain, to them, kind of what I'm seeing from my perspective, how I'm going to approach this. Um, we're both situations. We're playing games of Warhammer. I'm by definition a competitive player. Does that mean that that game was competitive?
Mm.
So I think before we can even approach uh, the concept of esport, we have to define what competitive is. If it is going to go that direction, you're going to need professional TOs, you're going to need professional referees, you're going to need professional players.
Right.
Um,
Which is another can of
you
worms
know,
that we won't get into on this podcast.
Not the time, not the interest,
Right.
not really my cup of tea.
That
Right? If
that's yeah, it's so far out that you and I will be the old men on the back porch talking about. I remember whenever Marathi had Rend 1 on her heart render. He said, but she had Rend 2 2 weeks later, and yeah, might not be our concern.
because one of the things I'll say to this, the Rob the Honest Wargamers Super Series, I think is maybe the boldest and truest take on what competitive Age of Sigmar can look like.
Mm-hmm.
It is a clear, delineated scope that seeks an outright definition to what competitive play is,
Mm-hmm.
and a rules system around it that helps facilitate that specifically. Um, and it's a man in the arena kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's particularly bold that he's gone ahead and done it. I don't particularly love that he started out with cash prizes right away, but look, it's the thing he's doing, and he has a right to do it, and he has a
Yes.
right to do it the way that he wants to. Um,
And
so
that's said about everything. If you're out there and said I don't care to use the ITC despite this partnership, it's 100% you're right. You don't have to. No worries. Don't worry about it. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. No one should berate you for it. And if they are, you need to take a hard look of why am I even talking to this person? You know.
yeah, so closing out my original point before I took this all the way to a different direction.
Right.
is if we have this same community but more, that's what I would like most to get out of this. Is that this is just strictly a growth vehicle, that we get more people involved, that those people feel welcome, that those people you know share these community values, that it's important to give people good games. It's okay to play hard. You know, there's tournaments, there's events. Every event that you go to, probably the top 10%, regardless of field, are there to try and win the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the bottom 10% that are there to have fun, their time there is equally as valid as those that are on tables 1, 2, and 3.
100%. No,
And if we can do that, then I think that something really special has been done.
I love that sentiment. And I'd like that to be the key endpoint, but I do have one simple question for you, so I'm not looking for you
Okay.
to elaborate too much. Do you see there being a space where there could be a pro, let's use the word pro, loosely, pro circuit and a casual amateur circuit where it separates possibly those two things so we can have the best of these both worlds potentially?
So this is something I have kicked around with folks who are running some larger events, Adepticon included. And I have had preliminary discussions on the notion of quote unquote competitive tracks and casual tracks,
Mm-hmm.
where you can sign up for either events, but you need to know going into either one of them that there are different expectations in each pool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's been some very difficult logistical challenges to defining the casual track. You know,
Right.
how do you regulate and govern that so that someone uh, a particular bad actor says, oh, well, I know I can't win the competitive track, but I can, go to the casual track and play something really
Mm-hmm.
dumb and club these baby seals. Um, I understand that that's a little bit different than a pro and an amateur circuit. I think they could coexist.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's possible when taken out to the furthest extreme. I don't think we're anywhere near something like that.
Right.
I don't see why, you know, if this goes out, all the way the direction that like 40K is, where 40K, I think LVO was like close to 1,000 players or something like that on the 40K
Mm-hmm.
side.
Yeah, huge.
They could absolutely have a pro circuit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of players. I don't know that there's a huge level of interest to play this on an international level and do these kinds of things. Streaming of games right now is extraordinarily rudimentary, and you need to have a full working knowledge of the game in order to really enjoy these streams in any meaningful way. And commentators and table bosses help out with that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but you need to know what every model on the table is, what it does, and what position this is all in.
Right.
Where at the basis level, if you go to a sporting event and you know nothing about baseball, and the guy hits the ball super far, and everyone's cheering, you can take by osmosis
Yeah, there's context
that that
clues.
was a that that
Yeah.
was a good thing.
Yeah. For sure. And the that knowledge and that level of expertise on all those things, I mean, that's kind of circle back into you don't get that without capital, which kind of filters
Right.
back, like I said, way back to the beginning issue, and that you brought up and mentioned to be cautious about. So I think that's good. I think I really appreciate you coming on to lay out all the things to be cautionary of, the things that you like, the things that you don't like. I think it was a very true dialogue that I hope I hope this is one of the like, not that I'm a podcast to grow. I just hope a lot of people will listen to this and hear this because and also listen to the one with Joe. Like listen to both because there's two sides to this and understand that no matter where you're at on this, having a dialogue is how we make sure that we shape this thing because we are community leaders. Everyone in this community is very important. You run these events, you go through these events. Together we can shape this into what we want it to be as a group and make sure it doesn't go off the rails maybe in a way we don't want. And so the Age of Sigmar community, I think we're all very much in the same mindset and we can probably have something that fits everybody's needs. So
Yeah. And to to build off that with a closing point, I don't expect what I said here to change any hardliners' opinion on myself really or other folks in this group. In the same way that I wouldn't expect the show you had with Joe to change any real hardliner I.T.C bad kind of folks' opinions. Um, Professionally, I'm an evidence-based person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the long and short of it is the evidence that I have on the table in front of me from the system that exists presently, I don't think is acceptable for this community. And until proven otherwise, I am going to demonstrate outward concern. There may very well be a day where I look at it and I go, all my concerns um, were addressed, were corrected, and I'm glad it was taken care of. And I hope that there's not a day where I can sit there and say, I told you so.
Right. Nope. It's perfect. Where can they find you once again if they want to come hit up your excellent content and your Milwaukee Bucks tweets?
Yeah. Personally, at hobby_bear, that's my Twitter account. Or you're welcome to come listen to myself and my, and the host of Cubic Shenanigans, Dan Bears, on Cubic Shenanigans, cubicshenanigans.net. Some esoteric Twitter handle. We're on basically all of the platforms in which you can listen to a podcast. So, we're not difficult to find if you really want to look.
Perfect. And as I said, links will be down below. If you want to follow me on my social media, strengthhammer_, strengthhammer.net. Check out the merch. Like, subscribe if you haven't already. Share this around. Like I said, I think this is an important one to share around for people to just see a nice dialogue like this. So have a good day, everybody, and stay Stormcast strong.